Siblings named Kaylin and Kyle messaged and said that they believed their uncle was working on a manuscript or an academic research paper about the truth about giants, but then that manuscript was stolen from his estate before they could get a hold of it. So what happened was their uncle passes away. He was their dad's only brother, and they were the last living relatives. Their uncle had no family of his own. Their own dad has sadly passed away years earlier, but there was like a 10-year age gap between him and his older brother, their uncle. So their dad wasn't really close with him, and they weren't really close with him. Like they had met him when they were little, but didn't really have any kind of relationship. What their dad had ever really told them about their uncle was that he was an academic, he was heavily invested in his work, that he traveled all the time, and that's why he wasn't really around, and that he cared about the past too much. Dad had basically just said that he didn't really prioritize anything besides his work, which, fine, that's his prerogative. Kyle said that their uncle had been formally trained and worked as an anthropological researcher who specialized in pre-classical civilization. He had earned advanced degrees from a respected university. And early in his career, Kyle said that he worked on legitimate, well documented research excavation projects in the Middle East, South America, and Central Asia. He published several peer reviewed papers and then eventually stopped working in academia and eventually went on to like consult for private museums, unnamed heritage preservation groups, whatever that means. His background, just so you understand a little bit of like who this man was, right? So they get to his estate and it's a modest house. It's sparsely decorated. He was not wealthy by any means, despite his long career. Kaylin and Kyle had never been over there. It was like an hour and a half from where they lived. But basically, they had already decided before even getting over there that they were pretty much just going to sell everything because they weren't really close with him. Kaylin was getting married and had a wedding to pay for, and Kyle was a junior in college and had a lot of student loans. So they had basically already agreed before even getting over there. But when they get over there, they see he doesn't really have any fancy furniture. He has no fancy electronics. Nothing's really worth much. He does have this extensive book collection, small artifacts, and then he has photographs and photographs lining the walls of him in various places around the world, like deserts, mountain ranges, forests. There's places so remote they don't even have landmarks, and there's like just photos of excavation sites. Paul said walking through his house, it felt like just being like a passerby or like a tourist in someone else's life without really any context. Like he didn't know this person really. So they talked to their mom about it. Their mom's like, why don't you hire an estate liquidation company and they'll come in and they'll determine the value of everything in the house and they'll kind of handle it and you just pay them a percentage. That's what they do. And the estate agent comes over and she walks them through the house and she's like, okay, let's go through everything first and see if there's anything you want to keep. But they kind of look at everything. They're like, there's really no heirlooms here. There's really nothing like that means anything to us personally. So like, we're good with just selling everything. And the estate agent's like, cool. Like, well, just take one last look and then, we'll get to work. The estate agent's in the main living room looking at things, starting to like make some notes. Kaylin's walking around and Kyle walks into the bedroom. Kyle's just kind of going through opening and closing drawers to see if there's anything inside that he might want. And he notices this little like hand carved watch box on the dresser, but he opens it. There's nothing inside. It's like, whatever. Next to the dresser, there's a desk, and he just kind of glances at the desk and he notices this brown accordion style folder that's like jam packed with something. And there's a handwritten label on it. And it says the Book of Giants. He opens it because it catches his attention and he sees there's like a bunch of hand-drawn maps with no borders, no real landmarks. There's journal pages, handwritten in his uncle's handwriting. There's pictures of excavation sites all over the world and of bones, but the bones are not of human proportion. Sketches of skeletons that also don't seem to match normal human proportions. He's like, what is this? And he starts reading. And then he realizes that this isn't just a collection of like photographs and maps. It's a manuscript or the start of one. Like his uncle had apparently been working on this manuscript, arguing that giants were not mythical creatures, that they had been real at one point, and that the evidence of their existence had been buried. Apparently found passages from ancient books like the Book of Giants, which was fragmented and found alongside the Dead Sea Scrolls from what Kyle could make of it. Notes in the margins of some of these texts by his uncle made to argue that these passages weren't symbolic or metaphorical in nature, but meant to be taken literally. Cross-reference them with excavation sites that he had personally dug up, with photographs he had personally took, and with evidence of salt mummies found in the Himalayas, for bodies that were supposedly preserved naturally, but with proportions that didn't seem to match human anatomy. Kyle's just flipping through and he's seeing all these notes about petrified giants, about petrified wood, about petrified giant trees and megaflora. One page has a line circled over and over in red ink that says they bury evidence. Kyle is completely immersed in this manuscript and he's in there for a while looking through this thing. And Kaylin finally walks in. She's like, what are you looking at? And he's like, look at this. He labeled it the Book of Giants. And so Kaylin's intrigued. She sits down, she starts looking through it, and she's immediately like drawn into. They're both in there for like another hour just looking through this thing, and they realize that there's a lot of evidence in this manuscript that he had supposedly been working on from their non-scientific perspective, right? So the estate agent walks in and she's like, oh, did you guys find something good? And they're like, oh, we think that we'd like to keep this. I think it's research. And she just looks at it and kind of dismisses it. And she's like, yeah, that's just like personal research. It's not really a value anything. Like we don't even have to say anything about it. It's yours. And she's like, can you guys come in here? I have some questions about whatever, some paperwork for you to fill out. So they follow her, and Kyle keeps thinking about the folder. He's like, I'm going to take it, whatever. But they finish up the day and he forgets it at the house, but he's like, it's fine. Like the house is locked. I can go back and get it. have to be back there like the following weekend or something. It's like a week later, it's the day they're supposed to go back to the house, and they get a call from the estate agency, and they said somebody broke into the house. Like the police are already on their way. We already called them. They're coming to make a report, and we're going through right now to see, what was taken. Get there, the police are there, inventory is reviewed, and they realize something strange, which is that nothing is missing. Nothing of value anyway. No furniture, no electronics, no artifacts, nothing like that. And so they're like, that's weird. And the police are like, oh, it's probably just somebody, in the neighborhood or like that passed by, noticed the house was empty. Someone who had cased the street or knew someone who lived on the street or something, and someone told them there was an estate agency here and they knew that nobody would be here. So they were probably just looking for cash. Police are like, oh, it happens. And so they take a report, and Kyle goes to the bedroom and he notices that that file folder is gone. That everything else in the bedroom was untouched. That little box was still there. The drawers were still neatly closed. Dust on the bookshelves had not even been disturbed. So that led him to believe that whoever had broken into the house knew exactly what they were there for and knew exactly where it was. And he says they found it. He says he kicks himself for not taking photos, not making copies, not taking that accordion style folder the day that he found it. He says, who really expects your dead uncle's estate to be broken into and robbed? Kyle said he and Kaylin went through all the books to see if there was maybe another copy of this manuscript anywhere in the house, but they couldn't find anything, nothing even referencing giants in general. Kyle said that he thinks that any evidence of the existence of giants that his uncle had was in this file folder that was now no longer in the house. Typically, these stories can come in from anyone, but Kaylin did corroborate his story, and she sent photos basically proving that their uncle was who they said that he was, of him on like excavation sites. She didn't want me to share because they want to keep his identity private, which is valid. She said she didn't want his good name in the scientific world to be tarnished because of his belief in something that might be considered fringe by some, at least not widely accepted as truth. Bill and Kaylin say they have no idea who broke into their uncle's property. There was nothing that they could find to suggest that he was in communication with anybody working on this project, but who knows? Your thoughts? I'm definitely intrigued by this one and can't wait to read the comments.
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. Something is walking around my house at night and mimicking noises of our phones and voices. I'm from northern middle Tennessee. My house is new and in the middle of nowhere, so we get lots of animals around here. We don't normally lock our cars and house because nobody's coming all the way out here to break in. Recently, my parents have started locking and deadbolting the doors without telling me why, and they keep shining a flashlight into the backyard when they hear stuff during the evening. Now, I may be paranoid or sleep deprived. I've been having nightmares, so I haven't gotten good sleep. Waking up most nights at 3 or 4 in the morning, no matter when I go to bed, but I've started hearing something outside when I wake up. The back of our house has an open porch area downstairs that has stairs to lead up to the second floor, where you can go inside through a door. My windows face this porch and a bluff in the backyard. I've been hearing something move through the leaves along the bluff. But when I peek through my window to see what it is, there's nothing there. It sounded like a deer at first, but they never come close to our house because of the cars and our dog. Now it's starting to make noises. I heard my mom's cough, but she's not out there because she doesn't get up until 6 a.m. My stepdad's ringtone, even though he keeps his phone with him in their room. And I swear I've even heard my own voice calling my dog's name. It's been happening for about 2 weeks now, and I'm getting nervous. I don't like to talk to my parents about stuff like this because they say I'm worrying too much, but this is beyond strange. Dark shadow figure at night. This happened to me about 7 years ago when I was living downstairs in my parents' basement. I was 22 at the time. Downstairs, there are 3 rooms and a hallway. I slept in one of the rooms, and when I slept, I always closed my bedroom door for the night. I always did this because otherwise my dogs would walk into my room and wake me up or start making noise when I was trying to sleep. With that said, I went to bed like normal, with the door closed and the lights off. At approximately 2 in the morning, I woke up. And by woke up, I mean that phase when you wake up and you're still groggy, so not really wide awake. I woke up in that state and noticed my door wide open with the hallway light on and a dark figure standing in my doorway. I thought it was my father and wasn't scared. I did not feel threatened or spooked. The dark figure began walking towards me, and with the hallway light shining on him, I could not discern anything except it was the shape of a man with shadowy features. The face was not discernible. It just looked like a shadow. As the figure was making its way towards me, I began to sit up in bed slightly, because, again, I thought it was my dad. The figure made its way to me and stood directly beside me. The figure's head looked down towards me, and in the same motion, put both of its hands on my chest. I could feel its hands on me, and in one swift motion, it pushed with some force into my chest. As the figure pushed my chest towards my bed, I felt my back hit the bottom of my bed frame. After the figure did that, it took its hands off of me, and I immediately sat up and flipped my lamp on. And once I did, the figure was instantly gone. I thought at first it must have been a dream, but I noticed my bedroom door was wide open. I checked upstairs where my parents slept and noticed both my mom and my dad in deep sleep. I have never encountered or seen the figure again. I still, to this day, do not know what it was.
Let's read another true and scary story. This is my first post and is a true story. I was living in a rural area in Oklahoma with my mother at a small lake house, and I'm probably 10 or 11 at this time. One night, I'm sleeping in my room when I randomly and abruptly wake up for no reason. This was not normal for me, and I felt very uneasy. The only sound I could hear was my mother snoring in the next room on the couch. I rolled over and tried to go back to sleep, but my need to use the bathroom was growing more urgent, so I grudgingly forced myself to head that way. The bathroom is on the other side of the house, around a corner and past the kitchen, and finally down a long hallway on the right. So after I made the trip and finished my business, I flipped off the light switch and started heading back to bed. That's when I heard the distinct click of the light switch, and I saw the glow of the bathroom light in the hallway. Terrified, I slowly turned around just to witness the light in the bathroom start clicking on and off. Click, 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 click. Finally, it shut completely off. In the dark of the hallway, my eyes began to make out a white shape near the end of the hall. It was around my size and crouched to the floor. At this point, I'm frozen to the spot as my mind begins realizing that no one else is home except for my mom and myself. Then the white shape began whispering in a quiet man's voice, "Help me, I'm lost." I remember wanting to scream for my mom, but I couldn't, and instead I barely said no, before this thing starts running at me on what sounded like all fours. I quickly ran through the kitchen and around the corner before running to my sleeping mother, shaking her awake. I remember saying, it's coming," and my mother's eyes going from dazed to alert in an instant. She asked me what was going on, and I saw her eyes looked over my shoulder before she screamed. Remembering her scream still makes my blood run cold. Never had I heard pure terror like that in my life, even to this day. She grabs me by the arms and pulls me into my room and slams the door. She holds me in her arms with her back pressed against the door as we listen. It sounded like this thing was running around in circles in the kitchen. We could hear hands and feet slapping against the tile. The kitchen had a sliding glass door to the outside, which sounded like it was thrown open and slammed. We sat there horrified until daybreak. I was sent to my grandmother's in the next town over for a while after that and never set foot in that house again. Years later, my mother said she went walking around the property after the incident and came across a small burial site with 3 headstones that each belonged to children from the early 1900s. It freaks me out because what I heard that night was a man's voice, but it was so unnatural. My mom still will not tell me what she saw behind me and what it was that made her scream. She tells me she's afraid it will know we're talking about it and it will come back. This is the first of many weird things that have happened in my life. This gave me full body chills, and I am horrified right now. I know it's probably horrific, but I would, if I were in this situation, press my mom for more details. That's what people in the comments are saying, because what is so terrifying that you think it's gonna come back if you talk about it? Just, oh God. As always, if you guys have stories you want me to read, please send them my way, and I will get to them if I can, and I will see you in the next one.
I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains, and very often things present themselves to you when it's dark outside or when you're by yourself. I think that's because they get more energy from you when you're alone and scared, kind of like the Monsters, Inc., where they make the kids scared and they get more energy from it. I think that's a real thing. I don't live in the Appalachian Mountains anymore. I live in Florida, but I think that something followed me here. A few years ago, I made a friend who lived in an apartment near Orlando International Airport. It was a new apartment, nice place, but the problem with his apartment, his closet had a light switch on the outside of the closet, as most do. The problem with his light switch is it would turn on by itself. It was not like one of those flat light switches. It was one with the little piece that sticks out and you flip it up and you can hear flip. That would happen when nobody was in that closet, nobody was in that room, nobody else was in the apartment. Sometimes I would hear it. So I stopped going anywhere near that bedroom. It would give me the most horrible feeling, chills up my spine. I wouldn't do it. I know when something's wrong. This one night, there was a party at his house. Not like a party. It was just a couple friends over playing games, whatever. I was sitting in a chair near the kitchen. Everybody else was sitting on the couch. And all of a sudden, something right in blood-curdling, horrible growl I have ever heard in my life. And it wasn't a dog growl. There was nothing around me. And my friend was sitting across from me, directly across the room, maybe 15 feet away. And he saw me because I shot up stiff. I was paralyzed because I was like, oh my God, I hadn't experienced something like that in so long since I moved away from the Appalachian Mountains. And he looked at me and he walked over and he said, "What was that?" I said, "Something growled in my ear." He said, "I saw your face. I saw your body tense up." So he knows it was real. I don't know what it was. After that, I would not go to his apartment by myself because I'd go feed his fish if he'd go out of town or whatever. I wouldn't do it. I would not go in there. You know, when you've experienced these things, you can tell. I have chills right now thinking about this because I've never told this story because that was close to home. I live in Florida now. That wasn't in the Appalachian Mountains when I was younger. This is now. I'm still experiencing these things. But if you feel that something's off, trust your gut because you have instincts for a reason. If you like scary stories, follow me because I have so many.
Your guys' take on past life regressions, because I just did Brian Weiss's past life regression just as a bit of fun, just as a bit of research, and I think I saw something. So let me just tell you about my experience. To start off, I don't visualize. I can't visualize. I've got something called aphantasia. Lots of people have it. It just means I can't see images in my head, but I can imagine. How I think is very descriptive. Because of this, no form of meditation, hypnotherapy, visual storytelling has ever worked on me, ever. But I was inspired because I saw somebody talk about their experience with past life regression during this YouTube video, and I was like, why not? Let's give it a go. It was literally the first video I saw on TikTok this morning, and it said you need to do it when you're the most relaxed. I'm the most relaxed right when I wake up. So I was still in bed, curtains were still shut. I thought, I'm going to put on this YouTube video and see how we get on. If you don't know how I feel about the theory of past lives, it's kind of like the egg theory. It's usually too much coincidence. I think you're either dreaming or you're imagining, and that kind of always comes from kids, the storytelling aspect. That always makes me think it's a story, and a really good one at that. But like I said, something happened to me this morning, so who knows what it is. The first thing he asked you to do is visualize or imagine, which I think really helped me, being surrounded by light, and this light is taking all your stress away. It took me a while to get there, but eventually I was seeing, I don't know if this was actually physical because I had my eyes shut, but I was seeing pulses of a very bright turquoise blue light just kind of going all over my body. He says you're in a garden. I couldn't see a garden, but he did say this light will wrap all around you. It kind of did. All I could see was this very bright turquoise blue light. After that, he said, go back to a childhood memory. And I was at my nan's fridge. She had a very small fridge, and it was about my height, so I must have been 3 or 4. And I was opening the fridge, trying to look in it. She used to have a chocolate drawer in there, and I think I was going towards that. But then because I knew the memory, I knew that on the fridge there was magnets, and I was trying to picture these magnets, but I was trying too hard that I kept on coming out of it, and it kept on going from me. He did actually say, don't try too hard. If you are struggling, step away or float away. So I stepped back, and then I started walking through the house. And that's when I opened the door to the living room, and I just saw a silhouette, no features, but a silhouette of my nan. Oh, what's weird is, like I said, I don't visualize, and everything was so fleeting. And anytime I saw something, like I actually saw something, not imagined it, it would go instantly, because I felt like subconsciously my eyes were moving into the direction where this image was, and it would go. After that is where it starts to get weird, and I don't know if I actually saw this, I imagined it, or this past life regression worked. But he says, go back to your mother's womb. Sorry, what? A long time I literally saw nothing. It was just black, nothing. And then every now and then I would have flashes of like the inside of like cells, and I could see the texture, the colour. It was like a pinky, orangey, white colour, like little tiny bumps. Some had like long tendrils on. I kept on seeing that, but so fleeting. And I could hear sounds that sounded like you were slurping up like the dregs of a drink with a straw. So like you're getting up no liquid. I kept on hearing that. Like I said, weird. And then he says, picture birth with no pain. I saw this, I physically saw this, like an animal drop. That's all I saw, was just a drop. And he counts you back and says, you're going to be in a past life. And he did say you might not have one. And for a long time, again, all I saw was black nothingness, literally nothingness. And I thought, maybe this is the first time I've been here. And then all of a sudden, it was like my eyes had woken up because I heard something, and it was like a whistle or like a rustle, and I was a deer. I told you, it gets weird. It was like I was looking at it in third person view, and it was a female doe deer, and all I could really see was like the top of the ears, the shape of the head, and the thought was just so simple. It was just nothing. Like, I think that's why I saw nothing until something caught my attention and I looked in the direction and I could see it. I was in like this kind of woodland, but it also had like a very big plain. Thoughts were just nothing but like sun, warmth, smell. That was literally the thoughts that I had. That was it. And then he says, go back to a moment that's really pivotal in this life. And again, all I saw was a flash of an image, and it was a silhouette of a bear. It was a black bear, but I don't know if that was just a silhouette. And it was just an immediate flash, and it was fear. And then my alarm went off. So I came out of it. I can 100% confirm that I was awake, because the entire time I could hear my fan that was on in my room, and I could feel my dog by my feet. I don't know if it was my imagination. I don't know if it was the first time I ever visualised anything in my life. I don't know if it was some sort of past life regression where I was a deer. Who knows? Definitely give it a go. It's on YouTube and it's free. I might give it a go again in a couple of weeks' time. But that's my experience.
So this girl woke up in the hospital and had no idea how she got there, why she got there, or what happened for 5 months. Just recently, she started to remember what happened, and what happened was terrifying. So Mary lives in Australia, and Mary had to move out of the house that she was currently living in, and so she was kind of browsing for houses at this time. Now, she did find a house. It was a 2-story house. She did say that there was a problem with the house. She said it looked a bit sketchy, but it was within her budget and she needed to move, so she bought the house. So this house was like built in the 80s, and the day that she moved in, she said that she walked in the door, she opens the door, and just whoosh, this big cold breeze just hits her in the face. Now, she doesn't really think anything of it because it is an old house after all, and it's really late when she gets there. So it's like 11 o'clock. So she just wants to go to bed. So she goes up to bed, she climbs into bed, she puts the blankets over her, and she starts to try to fall asleep. When suddenly she starts to hear something. She hears, Mary, Mary, I see you. Then this big bang, and then suddenly just silence. Now, at this point, she's in a little bit of shock, but she thinks that she's dreaming at first because she's like, there's no way that just happened. So she's trying to rationalize it in her head, and she's like, I'm just tired. It's been a really long day. This has been a tough move. Like, I'm just tired. I need to get some sleep. So she does. She ends up falling asleep. So she's sleeping peacefully. She has no idea how long she was sleeping for when suddenly, bang, again, except for this time it's coming from downstairs. So she decides that she's going to go downstairs and she's going to check what the hell just made that huge sound. So she goes to get out of bed and walk out of the room, but it is like pitch black. So at this point she's a little nervous. So she just kind of calls out, hey, is anyone there? When suddenly she hears that whisper again, except for it's not a whisper this time. It says the exact same thing, except for it says, Mary, I see you, just like that. loud, but a deep voice. So at this point, she is absolutely horrified. So she runs back to her bed and she gets underneath her covers. She's literally hiding underneath her blankets. She's so terrified. And she's just telling herself over and over again, this is just a dream. I am just dreaming right now. And suddenly she hears creak. Her door is slowly opening. And then she hears dun, dun, slow footsteps walking towards her bed until the footsteps get right to her bed and she can feel something hovering over her. Now, she doesn't hear any whispers or voices at this point. She just feels whatever this is literally hovering over her. When suddenly something just yanks on her hair and then grabs her hair, pulls her off of the bed, across the floor, out the door, and down the stairs. So this whole time she is fighting. All she is thinking about is she needs to get out of that house. So she's fighting as hard as she can. This thing is not letting go of her. She finally gets to the bottom of the stairs and she's trying to get up and she cannot get up because it feels like something is standing on her chest. She said that this happened. She could not breathe and that this was going on for 2 hours. She could not get up for 2 hours or move or barely breathe. After 2 long hours of this, she passes out and wakes up in the hospital. She has no idea how she got there, no idea what happened, no idea what that was, and she doesn't remember any of that at all until about a few months ago. She just remembered what happened a few months ago. She said that it felt for 5 months like somebody was literally controlling her, like it wasn't her, like something was controlling her and would not let her remember, and that she just started piecing things together recently. What the hell? That is so terrifying. That makes me really, I would wonder, number one, if this was paranormal at all, if like the whispering didn't happen and because obviously if someone is whispering or saying names and you can't see them, but it's happening right in front of you, that's the only thing that makes me think, yeah, this is probably paranormal. Otherwise, I would think that someone broke into her house because that's like the only logical explanation in my head, but the other stuff doesn't make sense. So unless someone was really good at and also making her not remember, how does that happen? How does someone make you not remember unless they slip something into your drink? I have no idea. The story did unfortunately end there, and I'm left with so many questions. Number one, did she ever figure out how she got to the hospital? Number two, did someone find her or did she wake up and go to the hospital? I guess that's the same question. Number three, does she still live there? Number four, did she have any injuries when she got to the hospital? And why was she hospitalized? That would be my question or questions. What are your questions if you have any? I can definitely email her back and ask her some of your questions. I don't know if she wants to remain anonymous. I did not use her name in this because she didn't tell me. And when people don't tell me, I don't use their names. Those are the questions that I have. Terrifying story. I can't imagine that. I'm so sorry that happened to you. That is super scary. But any thoughts, suggestions, or opinions would be great. But as always, please be respectful.
I was dating this guy for just 1 month, but the horror that happened when I went to visit his family still bring chills down my spine when I think about it. Story time. So like I said, I was dating this guy, let's call him Dave for the sake of this video, for just 1 month. But within that 1 month, he kept pestering that I go to see his family, and I thought it was just too soon for me to be meeting his family, but he insisted, so I gave in. He finally took me to go see his parents. The drive alone was 2 hours to go see his parents. We reached their house. It was in the middle of the forest, in the middle of nowhere, no houses near it. As soon as we pulled up the driveway, the door swung open. His mum came running and looked at me, called my name and said, "You look very beautiful in person." She hugged me really tight, digging her nails into my skin. I felt really nervous and very uncomfortable, but then I just thought maybe, this is how she is. We went inside and his uncle greeted me, but he was staring at me very weird, very uncomfortable, and he even said I look very sexy in person. I thought this is absolutely disgusting for him to even comment like that. My boyfriend said to me that, oh, he's just like that and he's joking, he means no harm. Then we sat down to have dinner and they kept asking me questions. The dad said, "Oh, by the way, where are your parents?" Which I thought was really strange, and I said they are back home. Before I could actually alter another word and say something, his mum said, Do they know that you are here tonight? That question did not sit well with me because I'm starting to think, are they planning on doing something or what? But anyway, I just sat there trying to eat the dinner. She is shoving the food on my plate and I told her that's enough because I'm stuffed. Anyway, after eating, she brings this cake and I kid you not, the cake said wedding cake. I was shocked thinking what is going on. So I was wondering what's going on here. His dad pulls out this box, opens it, and there's an engagement ring inside. His mum says, do us the honors. He knelt on one knee and proposed. I told him, it's only 1 month. How could he be proposing to me? And he said to me that when you know it is the right person, you do not need to waste time. And I laughed nervously, telling him that no, it is too early. Anyway, his uncle said, oh, I knew it. She's not to be trusted. I think she's taken. I thought, taken? What's he on about? I'm not taken. Anyway, my boyfriend grabbed my hand very tight and his dad stood at the doorway. His mum stood behind me and his uncle stood on the side. I was scared and I didn't know what was going on. His uncle started calling me an ungrateful bitch. His mum said that I'm part of the family now. I ate their food, so what do I want? They started to push me back on the chair very tight. I was screaming. His dad said, put the ring on your finger. I was crying, pleading, and I said no. His dad said, you must do it now. I was confused. I didn't know what to do. My instinct is how to get out of this. So all of a sudden, a thought came to mind and I shouted, but if we are going to do this, I think my parents need to be here to see this since it's a very special day. They both looked at each other, which is my boyfriend and the mum, and I could see that they weren't convinced. His uncle said, I don't think so. I think she's taken. And I said, no. I said, my boyfriend is the only guy I love and I want to be with. But I think if we're going to do this, we should do it properly. Anyway, my boyfriend loosened his grip and said, I'll go get your parents. He took the key to leave. I told him to wait. I need to give him a goodbye kiss before he leaves. So they let me off. I stood up. As I walked past, I grabbed the knife that was on the table that would be used for the cake. I went slowly to kiss him, his eyes closed, and I stabbed him in the eye. He screamed and dropped the car keys. I grabbed it and I legged it. His mum chased after me, screaming that I should stop. I ran into the car, locked it. His dad outside, banging on the car window, and I just put my foot on the gas and I went. I drove for over an hour, stopping to check. I got home. I moved houses. I changed my phone number. And I was praying never ever to see him again. But every night I kept getting haunted by the knife that I stabbed him in the eye with. I couldn't go to the police because I do not want to get arrested for stabbing him.
If you live alone and you're in bed trying to fall asleep, do not watch this video. If you choose to stay, don't say I didn't warn you. The story was sent to me by a follower who had a creepy experience here in eastern Kentucky in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. Every year on the 4th of July, their family would all meet up at their grandparents' house because they had a really big farm and it was convenient to celebrate. So just like any other year, that's what they did. So they got there in the middle of the afternoon with his 4 other siblings and his parents. They met up with the rest of their cousins and they were all swimming in the in-ground pool. They swam all day. By this time, it was already getting dark and they had already started the fireworks show, so the 2 younger siblings had gotten out of the pool to go watch the fireworks. Grandparents came over to the rest of the kids or teenagers that were left in the pool. They were like 16, 17 years old. And they told them that they probably shouldn't stay in the pool any longer, which he thought was strange at the time, but he didn't think anything of it. They listened and they got out, they went inside, got dressed, and started watching a movie. One of the cousins got bored and suggested that they all go play hide and seek in the woods. Obviously, they were all reluctant because they had grown up with their grandparents telling them to never go out into the woods at night. If you know the rules about the Appalachian Mountains, you know. Their cousin told them that those were all just legends and they'd be fine. Eventually he persuaded them and they grabbed their flashlights and went on out into the woods. Jeremiah, which is whose idea it was to go outside, decided he was going to be the seeker first and that everyone else had to hide. He gave everybody a head start, so they all ran out into the woods first to hide. He counted to 100, and since there were 6 of them, they decided to break off into groups of 3. The groups ran off into separate directions, but they eventually found places to hide. After a few minutes go by, nearby, they start hearing Jeremiah's voice deep in the woods. He was pleading for help and screaming and begging and calling out their names. They knew something was wrong, and they thought that since he was deep in the woods that maybe he was getting attacked by animals or something. So they decided they were going to get up and start walking and see what was going on. When he went to stand up, he felt somebody grab his ankle and pull him to the ground. He turned to look who it was, and it was Jeremiah, which really confused him because they had just heard Jeremiah's voice coming from deep in the woods, remember? But Jeremiah looked utterly terrified. He whispered, "That wasn't me. I heard it too." At this point, they were all terrified, so they went to go find their other 3 cousins who were still hiding somewhere in the woods. They started headed back up the hill, hoping that they would find their other 3 cousins and they could get the hell out of there, until they heard petrified screaming coming from behind them. The screaming, though, was one of the cousins that was like sobbing hysterically, and the other cousins were packing her. They explained that they also heard Jeremiah crying for help, so they went to go check it out. And when they got there, they heard this weird distorted scream, and they saw this silhouette rushing towards them. So they immediately started running back. They all knew that they had to get out of the woods. So they started walking uphill again until they started hearing movement and shuffling behind them. They looked behind them and they saw a deer, like a buck, facing them with his back towards them, which was already really weird behavior for a deer. But then the deer got up on 2 legs, and they said that they saw a piece of like flesh or something fall off of it. They all started screaming and running up the hill, and they heard this weird distorted scream behind them again. It was like weird demented screeching or something. Finally, they reached the property, and they didn't stop running until they got inside the house. They were scolded by their grandparents for going out into the woods, but they told them what happened to them. Their grandparents went pale. They told them to never go back into the woods under any circumstances. They haven't gone back in the woods after dark since, and whenever they're up visiting their grandparents, it always feels like something's watching them. I can't wait to hear what y'all think about this story in the comments. If you have a story you want to send to me, you can send to my email address.
She opened her eyes and something was standing there. This story was submitted from one of my followers. I'm not sure if she wants to remain anonymous or not, but listen to this. She says, "There's something that's always stayed with her. Something that she's carried quietly for a long time. She doesn't know why it still feels so heavy to talk about, but it does. It happened one night while she was staying with her ex at his grandma's house. It was a house that they were renting at the time. She said everything during the day felt normal, almost too normal, which is kind of why when she thinks back to it, it makes it worse. So suddenly, in the middle of the night, she is yanked out of her sleep instead of sort of gradually waking up. She said the room was still and dark, but there was an unnatural crushing feeling in the air. She said it wasn't just fear. It was heavier than that, like something shifted in the atmosphere. And she said before she even opened her eyes, she just knew there was a presence in the room with her. She knew she wasn't alone and something was very wrong. And then when she opened her eyes and focused straight ahead, she saw it. It was a figure standing there, completely black, darker than the shadows nearby. It wasn't blending in with the shadows. It was standing alone, solid, and it felt wrong. She said it was tall and still, and it was wearing a wide-brimmed hat, an old-fashioned kind. Where the face should have been, she said you could not make out any features at all. It was just all dark. And yet, she could feel it watching her. And what made it even more unsettling was that it had like a static quality about it. Almost like an image that couldn't hold itself together, kind of like an old staticky TV where the image is all scrambled. It was flickering and distorted and buzzing at the edges, almost as if it were phasing in and out of the room. She said it was never fully solid, yet never fully gone, and it somehow made it feel almost unreal, but that also made it feel more threatening to her. She said she tried to move, scream, sit up, anything, but her body would not respond. She was frozen. Her heart was pounding so hard it hurt, and everything else around her felt like time had slowed down. She said the silence was unbearable, and the figure just didn't even move at all. It just stayed standing still. She said all that she could do was just to close her eyes and repeat, "Go away, go away, go away, go away." But she didn't dare speak to it directly because somehow acknowledging it made it seem more real. She said she doesn't know how long that lasted. It could have been seconds or minutes. It just felt like an eternity. And then when she opened her eyes again, it was just gone. She said everything felt like it did before. The room was quiet, normal, and still. However, she was not. She was terrified. She said it only happened to her that one time and nothing ever happened like that since, but it has stuck with her. And she says even now when she thinks about it, she gets that horrifying, uneasy feeling crawling up her spine. And she doesn't feel like it was a dream. It was solid and it was real. It felt more intense and more horrifying than she feels like her imagination could have conjured up. So what are your thoughts? I mean, I kind of feel like it sounds like Hatman. It sounds so similar to a lot of those other stories.
People who work the night shift often have supernatural encounters. Now, there was a story that came out of Arizona. There's this man named Edward. Edward said he got a job right outside of the Navajo reservation at this small gas station. Now, he said his manager, this older Native American man, he told him before he started this job, he said, there's one thing you must know. There is a set of rules that I have when you work night shift here at this gas station. He said the first rule, now this is the most important rule. When it strikes midnight, you must lock the front door and do not unlock it ever until the morning. He said the second rule, if someone comes to that door and they want to come in after midnight, do not let them in. Even if it seems like they need help, even if it seems like someone you know, do not let anybody into the gas station after midnight. And he said, because they aren't really people. Edward's like, what do you mean? And he said, I can't talk about it, but just make sure you do not let them in. And he said, the third rule is you must keep the lights on all night long. Don't ever let the lights go out. And if the power goes out, you are to turn this lantern on and some of these flashlights, but do not let it get dark in here. And he said, the fourth rule, you must never answer the phone after midnight. He said, even if it continuously rings like someone important is trying to get a hold of you, do not pick up that phone. So Edward was like, okay, at the time he just kind of thought it was ridiculous, but he's like, all right, I'll do it. So he works at this gas station for several months, and he listens to what this man tells him. And he locks the door at night, and he keeps the lights on, and he doesn't let anyone in. Well, this one night, there was a really bad monsoon, and it was raining, and there was lightning and thunder, and it struck midnight on the clock. So he locked the door. At 12:01, he hears a knock at the door. And when he goes to the front door and he looks out the glass, he sees this woman. She is completely soaked. She's muddy. Her eyes look very wide. She looks in distress and like something is wrong. And she goes, please, please let me in. You have to let me in. And she's, crying and screaming, banging on this window. And he's like, look, I'm sorry, we're closed. Like, I cannot let you in. And she goes, no, please, you don't understand. You have to let me in. And she, banging harder and harder. And he's like, I told you we're closed. Go away. He said, that's when this woman, at the time, you could see her from this light that was outside. It was shining on her. But when she stepped outside of this light, so that's when he noticed her face started to change. She didn't look human anymore. She looked like some kind of monster. And he said she just twisted her head to the side and she took off running. And instantly he got this feeling of dread, like something was wrong. Well, he said all night long, he could hear stuff yelling at him from outside, telling him to open the door. Some of these voices sounded like his family members, friends. And he said all night long, something was harassing him. Well, that freaked him out, but he really needed this job. So he was there for a couple more months. And then he said one night, the worst thing happened. They had a blackout and the power was completely gone. And he said it was completely dark in this gas station. Now he locked the doors and everything, but he remembered what that old man told him. Do not let it get dark in here. So he scrambles to find this lantern and he starts trying to get it lit. And he can hear stuff moving around. And he can see shadows of things running around the gas station. And he can hear this laughter. And he could hear banging sounds coming from outside, like something was trying to get in. Finally, he manages to get this lantern on. But all night long, once again, he could see things running around. He could hear voices calling him, telling him to come out of the light. And the next morning, he was so terrified, he quit this job. And he said that was probably the most terrifying job he had ever worked, working night shift at a small gas station outside of the Navajo reservation. When Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005, it was just devastating to the New Orleans area. Like half of the city was destroyed. And later on, they end up rebuilding all of those houses. So you can think of that energy that still remained in the area. Now, this story, there was a woman who moved into one of these homes. And she had lived there about 5 months when one day she hears a knock at the door. She goes to the front door and answers it. And she sees there's a young girl standing on the porch. And she's soaking wet. Her clothes are all wet and she's drenched. And she's lightly kind of crying. And she says, please help me. Where's my mommy? Like, I'm lost. I don't know where I'm at. And the woman, is like, oh my goodness, like, come inside. You must be freezing. So she says, here, wait in the living room. I'm going to go and get you a towel. when she goes into the other room and then comes back, the little girl is gone. So she calls the police, and the police come out. They cannot find this girl anywhere in the area. And the weird thing is, there are wet footprints on the carpet where the girl had walked into the living room. A couple weeks after this, right, she gets another knock at the door. She answers the door, and it's this older gentleman. Same thing, you know, his clothes and everything. He's just completely drenched in water. And he says, I'm confused. I don't know what happened. I think there was a flood. Please, can you help me? Can you help me? And the woman's like, yeah, absolutely. Just wait here. Let me call the police. So she runs in the other room and dials 911. But by the time she gets back to the front door, the man is gone. And once again, they come out. They cannot find this man anywhere. But there is a puddle of water on the porch where he was standing. So over several months, she receives these visitors at her front door that would come and ask for help and then vanish. Well, one day she goes to this memorial for victims of Hurricane Katrina, and there's all of these pictures on a mural on the wall. And she notices, right, the little girl in one of these pictures. In another picture, she notices the man who came to her front door. And she realized that these were people who were victims of Hurricane Katrina that were visiting her home and were confused because it had happened so fast.
What do you do if your child wakes you up in the middle of the night and tells you, Mom, there's a man at my window? That's the reasons I changed people's names. Jasmine always talked about how she used to buy clothes for her daughter from the thrift store. It was easy, it was convenient, it was less money than a regular store. As Jasmine's daughter noticed that in the thrift store, they also had a toy aisle, so of course she convinced Jasmine to go down that aisle. And that same day, the thrift store was having a sale. Everything that had a green dot or a yellow dot was on sale 50% off. His daughter grabbed two things, a music box as well as a doll. Jessica and her husband, Melissa, having an imaginary friend was nothing weird. Of course, the little girl had no siblings. All her family members were living hours away, so of course, she made up a friend. Her husband and her found weird was that after they bought the music box and the doll, Melissa stopped talking to Crystal. It's like Crystal completely had vanished and someone new took her place. Melissa argued with someone that's not there, and they would walk into the room and ask her, hey, are you having problems with Crystal? And of course, Melissa would say, no, Crystal's not here anymore. There's someone else here, and I'm not allowed to tell you his name. Jessica's husband, this was a real big red flag, and he kept telling Jessica, we need to get rid of whatever you brought home with Melissa that day. I don't care if it's a music box. I don't care if it's a doll. It needs to go. Jessica's reaction was, this is not a horror movie. This is not paranormal activity. Get over it. That stuff isn't real. And if she decided to make a new friend that is a boy, why are you being so defensive? Defense, he says to her, well, she's arguing as if she's heard us argue. And she's using words that we've never used before. We don't even argue in front of her. So why is she arguing with words that we've never used? Jessica was a brick wall. She had no intentions of listening to him at all and his opinion about a doll and a music box, which she deemed was stupid. Jessica knew and her husband that there was a man visiting their daughter every single night, just tapping at her window. Tap, 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 tap. I would have freaked out. Okay? Freaked out. So one night, the man was no longer outside her window. He was inside her room. Being a little girl and scared, she ran out her room and tells her mom and dad, there is a man that was outside my window, and now he's inside my room. Jessica's husband gets out of bed and runs into the room, and there he finds the window open.
On November 14th, 2018, John Chow hired two fishermen to take him out to this little island in the Indian Ocean. The fishermen were not excited about this, not only because it was illegal to take him out to the island, but because the last time some fishermen had gone to this island, they had both died. But the fishermen needed the money, and so they went with John and they drove under the cover of darkness to this island, and they anchored a little ways offshore. The next morning when the sun came up, John asked the fishermen to take him in a little bit closer, but the fishermen refused. So John put puts a kayak in the water and he begins paddling into this island. And as he gets close to the actual beach, he sees someone come out of the forest who has their face painted yellow, and they're screeching at the top of their lungs. And John yells out that he's not threatening them, he just wants to come ashore and talk to them. And then a wave of people with yellow painted faces come charging out of the woodline and start firing arrows in his direction. So John, in a panic, turns around and paddles right back out to the fishing boat. Later that day, John tries to make another attempt at landing on this island and communicating with the people that live there. So he takes his kayak and he goes down a little bit farther away from where those people had emerged from the tree line earlier in the day and shot him with arrows. He figured he was a little bit farther out of arrow range this way. He lands his kayak, he gets out, and the same group of people come out farther down the beach where they had been before. They see John. They all start looking at each other and they start screeching and running down the beach towards John. John stands there until they come all the way up to him. They don't shoot him with arrows, but they take his kayak, and they don't really know what to make of him. They're staring at him. They start speaking to each other in a language John doesn't understand. And then at some point, a child pulls his bow and arrow out and fires a bow directly at John. And he was holding a Bible, and he stopped the arrow with his Bible. And at that point, John is like, okay, I gotta go. And he jumps in the water and without a kayak has to swim a mile to get back to the fishing boat. The whole time, these people are firing arrows arbitrarily in his direction as he's swimming back out to the boat. And so the next day, on November 16th, he told the fishermen he wanted them to drop him off and he would swim in, and he wanted them to leave and be completely out of sight. The fishermen did not want to do this, but John reassured them that he was going to be just fine. He knew what he was doing. And so the fishermen drop him off and they leave. The next day, when the fishermen come back to collect John, they see these people with painted yellow faces out on the beach dragging his body by a rope. No one knows exactly what happened to John, how they killed him. There's lots of speculation about how it went down, but it's too dangerous for anyone to go back and retrieve his body, and so his body remains at North Sentinel Island. The few hundred people that live on North Sentinel Island that were responsible for killing John Chow, they're referred to as the Sentinelese, and they are unbelievably primitive. They are completely cut off from the modern world. They live a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. They have no conception of agriculture. They haven't even discovered fire yet. They literally have to wait for lightning to strike and then run and collect the embers and try to keep the embers alive. Researchers believe that the Sentinelese are direct descendants from the earliest human ancestors that came out of Africa. And as much as we'd like to learn more about the Sentinelese, we probably won't, because they aggressively resist outside contact. They won't even let the other similarly primitive neighboring island tribes to come on their island. The Sentinelese want only Sentinelese on that island. No one else can be there. If you're not a Sentinelese and you try to go to their island, they'll just kill you.
I was attacked by a serial killer.
Oh, my God, did you survive? Are we familiar? Is it like one of the...
Yes, the National Forest serial killer. He is on death row in Florida.
This is Gary Michael Hilton, aka the National Forest Killer. This absolute monster used his skills as a U.S. Army veteran to hunt people in national forests in the Carolinas, Georgia, and Florida. He is officially responsible for at least 4 murders between 2007 and 2008, but he is suspected of many more. In October 2007, a retired couple in their 80s, John and Irene Bryant, went for a hike in a national forest in North Carolina. After their family hadn't heard from them for 2 weeks, they were reported missing to the Henderson Police Department. A search was launched, and through the investigation, it was found that John had tried to call 911 on the day they vanished, but the cell signal dropped and he wasn't able to call for help. On November 10th, searchers found Irene's body covered in leaves, and it was determined she had been bludgeoned to death. Because John hadn't been found by this point, he was suspected of Irene's murder until the following February, when hunters found his skull in a nearby national forest. And on December 3rd, 2007, Cheryl Dunlap was reported missing after she didn't show up to teach her Sunday school class in Tallahassee. Her white Toyota Camry was found abandoned just north of the county line the next day. On December 16th, 2007, a hunter named Ronnie and his dog were in Appalachian Forest when they discovered her body. She had been decapitated, and her body was so badly decomposed by this point that she had to be identified through DNA records. A green truck had been seen in the area when Cheryl disappeared, and authorities announced they were looking for the driver because he had used her bank card in Tallahassee at least 5 times. Over the next few days, several people made reports that they had seen a strange homeless man and his dog driving around in a green Chevy Astro van, but this didn't lead to an arrest at that time. It was around then that people started to really worry that there was a serial killer working between Georgia and Florida. On New Year's Day 2008, 24-year-old Meredith Hope Emerson went for a hike with her dog on Blood Mountain in Georgia. Numerous people would later report they had seen a homeless man with his own dog following her. On January 3rd, police located her 1995 Chevy Cavalier with a police baton, a dog leash, and a water bottle in it, but no sign of Meredith. Police finally figured out the man following her had been 61-year-old Gary Hilton, and that he often walked his own dog, Dandy, on that same trail. On January 3rd, Meredith's dog, Ella, was found wandering in a Kroger parking lot and was safely returned to her family. And on January 5th, authorities searched a dumpster in Cumming, Georgia, and located, among other things, her bloodied clothing, her driver's license, and a bloodied car seatbelt. 5 hours after Meredith's belongings were found in that dumpster, Hilton was arrested because people had reported seeing him vacuuming his van at a nearby establishment. Gary Hilton is also believed to be responsible for the 1997 murder of Judy Smith, Jason Knapp of South Carolina, Patrice Enders of Cumming, Georgia, Rosanna Milani of Miami, who disappeared in North Carolina, and Michael Scott Lewis of Daytona. Hilton was officially sentenced to death in February 2011 and is still on death row. Loran Cole is also sometimes referred to as the National Forest Killer because he murdered 2 people in the Ocala National Forest. I will make a separate video about that case. All of this to say, thank goodness that young woman had been able to get away from Gary Hilton the day she encountered him. That is the face of pure evil.
You can't make this stuff up. Like I've known the story of real-life boogeyman.
He made his children dig their own graves before he annihilated his entire family after inviting them over for Christmas. Every single state has had some sort of serial killer in its history, and today I'm going to tell you guys about the most notorious serial killer from Arkansas. And if you're new here, this is a map of all the states I've covered so far in this series. We have less than 10 states left, so if you want to go binge watch the entire playlist, you can. If you're not new here, thank you so much for sticking with me through so much of the series. Getting right into the story though, today we're going to be talking about Ronald Simmons in Arkansas, and this is a really tough story. When someone annihilates their entire family, including their young grandchildren, it's just another level of brutality that I just can't comprehend. So this guy technically could be more of a spree killer than a serial killer. There is some debate on the official determination. I think he could be considered both, but either way, he's a scary, evil, violent, terrifying guy. So a little backstory into Ronald. He was born on July 15th of 1940 in Chicago, and he was known as the bully of the family at a very early age. He would torment his sister and his half-brother. He was violent and angry very often, and he loved to correct people and prove people wrong and show them every single mistake they've ever made, and he had some serious control issues, again, at a very early age. So he grows up just not really fitting in, being a mean kid, having control issues, and in 1957 he drops out of high school and enlists in the Navy. He gets stationed in Guam and then later is sent to Washington, and it is here that he meets Bursaby Rebecca, and she goes by Becky Ulibarri, and they get married, and over the next 18 plus years that they're together, they have 7 children. And during this time, he's in the Navy, and then he switches over to the Air Force, and he was in Vietnam for a while, and he actually was in Saigon when it was attacked. And that, combined with his already established violence and control issues, just added to new level of rage. I think he had some PTSD. I don't know if it was ever diagnosed. Becky, his wife, even said at one point, when they were first together, that Ronald's own mother tried to warn Becky about what Ronald was like. Really, his own mom was like, get away, run. And at the time, unfortunately, Becky was just too in love and she didn't listen. And that is really devastating. Because he was controlling, he ended up controlling every single aspect of Becky's life. He wouldn't let her wear makeup. He always forced her to wear long dresses. Her hair always had to be back and it had to be up. And he wouldn't let her touch money. He wouldn't let her pay the bills. He wouldn't let her get a driver's license or even use the phone. He completely isolated her from everyone. And for a while, she was allowed to write letters to her family sometimes, but eventually he even said, I'm not buying you stamps anymore. And she would have to secretly get other people to give her stamps, but she's cut off from most of the world. So even that was very, very hard to do. And she basically is completely isolated from her friends, her family, everyone but her husband, who's very scary, and her children. So obviously he's just a terrible, awful guy already. And in 1981, he ends up getting investigated for allegations of child SA. He allegedly had impregnated his own 17-year-old daughter when someone anonymously called multiple times to say that his 17-year-old daughter was pregnant and it was his. Eventually, someone did come to the house and investigate, and his daughter's name was Sheila, by the way, and Sheila confirmed that it was in fact his child. And Sheila was his oldest child. And we actually find out that their oldest son, his name was Ronald Jeans Jr. He goes by Gene. I'm going to call him Gene for this story. He was the one that called and said, anonymously, that there was incest happening in their home. It is confirmed that Sheila is pregnant with her own father's baby. That is so unbelievably sick, and she's 17. They ended up going to court, and eventually Sheila testified against him, but at the time she did not want to. He gets criminally charged, and I don't understand why when he's like in trial and getting charged, they didn't arrest him then. And when sheriffs do go to his house to arrest him on August 11th of 1981, they discovered that him and the entire family had fled. The only exception is that Gene, the son who had reported that this was all happening, refused to go with them when they fled, and the whole family fled to Arkansas. And unfortunately, when they ended up not being able to track the family down, they didn't know that they had fled to Arkansas. They end up dropping the charges because they don't have him and they can't find his daughter, the witness, and so the charges are dropped. While they're living in Arkansas, over time Ronald gets more and more violent and weird and isolated, and he actually would lock his room and not let anyone, including Becky, in it ever. And his kids were not a fan of him. They did not like him. And by 1987, 6 years after they moved to Arkansas, their three oldest children, Sheila, Gene Jr., and then their other son, William, all were moved out living on their own or with their spouses, and they were now having children of their own. They don't have like that close of a connection with Ronald anymore, but they still are in contact with the family because there's multiple other kids in the house still, and they are close with their mother, Becky. Loretta was their fourth oldest child. She was still in high school, but she was in her senior year, and she was smart and honor student, and she was supposed to graduate that spring actually, and she had plans to leave as soon as she graduated, and she did not hide those plans. She made it very clear that she did not want to live under the same roof as Ronald anymore. So we're in the winter of 1987, and Christmas is rapidly approaching, and we don't know exactly when Ronald made his horrific, awful plan, but on December 22nd of 1987, he starts his plan to annihilate his entire family because he knew that Becky had sent out Christmas invitations. He knew that his kids that no longer lived with them were going to be coming over for Christmas, and this was probably one of the last times they were going to be able to get all of their children together. So weeks before this, he had made multiple of his kids that still lived at home dig a large hole in the backyard, and he told them it was for an outhouse, but in reality, they were digging their own graves. So on December 22nd of 1987, Gene Jr. is visiting, and Ronald ends up killing Becky, his wife, and Gene, his oldest son. He bludgeons them both, and then he kills his granddaughter, Gene's daughter, who was 3-year-old Barbara, by strangling her. He disposed of the bodies in the hole that he had made his kids dig weeks before, and then he waited for his other children that still lived in the house to come home from school for Christmas break. This was the last day of school before Christmas break officially started. His children, 17-year-old Loretta, came home from high school, 14-year-old Eddie came home from school, 11-year-old Marianne, and then 8-year-old Becky all come home and are separated, and eventually he strangled them one by one, and then as if that wasn't enough, he held them each underwater to make sure they were not breathing. He then dumped their bodies in the pit, and they were all still wearing their school outfits when they were murdered by their own father. And like I said, the kids came home from school and immediately their Christmas break started. And so no one notices when Becky and the kids aren't seen for days because obviously they're on break. It isn't until December 26th that the rest of his family comes over for celebrations. He first killed his son Billy and his wife Renata by shooting them, and then he killed their 20-month-old son Trey. He then shot and killed his oldest daughter, Sheila, and her husband, Dennis, and then he killed Sheila's 7-year-old daughter, Sylvia, which was not only his granddaughter, but his daughter as well. He also killed Sheila and Dennis's 21-month-old son, Michael, who was his other grandson. And unfortunately, he was not done killing yet. On December 28th, he took his son's car, his now deceased son's car, and drove it to Russellville, where he used to work from January of 1985 to November of 1986. So almost 2 years, he worked as a clerk at Woodline Motor Freight & Co. So Robert decides he wants to go back to that job and get revenge on some people that he worked with. So he first went to a law firm where Kathy Cribbins Kendrick worked, and he had been obsessed with her since they worked together at the freight company years before. She had rejected him multiple times, and he did not like this, and so he shot her in the head and ended up killing her. Someone called the police and reported this shot at 10:17 a.m. He then drove down the road to an oil company, and by the way, he had a very planned out route, how he was getting from one place that he was shooting someone to the next. He knew exactly where he was going and how he was going to get there undetected, and this was meticulously planned. This was not just a moment of rage. This was premeditated and very specifically planned. He drives to the oil company office and wants to kill the owner, who used to be his boss. His name is Russell Taylor, and he ends up shooting Russell and wounds him, and then he kills a guy named James David Chafin, who was a delivery driver and firefighter, and he had no relation to Robert. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. After shooting Russell and killing James, he ends up shooting at the desk clerk, and he thought he killed her, so he left. Luckily, he ended up missing and she survived, and she's able to give the police a very detailed description of the guy. This second shooting was reported only 10 minutes after the first one, so this was reported at 10:27 a.m., and the police are starting to realize this was done by the same guy. Robert then drove 3 miles to a downtown mini-mart and shot the store owner, David Salter, and an employee, Roberta Woolley, and both fortunately survived and later testified against him, but this happened immediately after those other 2 shootings, and so now the police are realizing they actively have a spree killer on their hands. Finally, the last stage in his plan, it went to the office of the freight company that he used to work at, and this is where he shot his former supervisor, Joyce Butts, in the head and chest. She survived and later testified, but she said she had no memory of the shooting, and she also said that after being shot by him, she had to go through open heart surgery and her left side is partially paralyzed. After shooting and trying to kill Joyce, he ends up ordering one of the other employees, her name was Vicky, at gunpoint to call the police. When police arrive, he ends up surrendering and handing over his gun. And he says he originally was planning on taking his own life, but when his gun misfired multiple times, he was worried that he wouldn't succeed at taking his life and that then he would be a vegetable. And that's his words, not mine. And he said he didn't want to be a vegetable. After taken into custody, he would not speak, and police are asking him, why did you do this? What was the motive? And one of the sheriffs knows that he has a large family, and they haven't heard anything from them. And so they end up deciding to go check on the family. And at this point, they have no idea that he has killed his entire family, annihilated them. They end up deciding to go to his house and check on them. And when they get there, they are horrified to find 14 bodies on their property. 8 of them were strangled and 6 of them were shot. It is still to this day not 100% clear why he did it. He never admitted to like a full motive, but we do know that the 3 oldest kids that had all moved out continuously tried to get Becky to move out and take the kids. The only reason Becky hadn't left him yet and moved out was she was worried she couldn't support all 4 of their kids that were still living with her, but it sounds like she was starting to actually make plans to leave him. And so likely what happened was he felt like he was losing control, and he decided that if he couldn't control them, he would just eliminate them. In the end, he was found guilty and imprisoned. He was kept isolated on death row until he was executed on June 25th of 1990. In total, he murdered 16 people, 14 of which were members of his own family over a span of under a week. He invited them over for Christmas, and instead of celebrating, he just murdered and annihilated his family, including his very young grandchildren.
Police arrived at the murder scene hunting for a masked intruder. They had no idea the killer never left. It was late March 2011 in Jerome, Pennsylvania. Erin Everett and Tori Minnick were a young couple living with Erin's parents. Now, the girls met the year before while working together. They worked as nurses' aides, which I'm guessing is kind of the American equivalent of like a healthcare assistant. Erin was a lesbian, but Tori had been engaged to a guy. So although Erin really fancied Tori, she actually didn't know whether she would be interested. She was like, I'm not really sure if she's into girls. So she decided to kind of hide behind texts and just text her that she was interested, let her know, and see what she said. And she was buzzing when Tori texts back saying, yes, I am. And the rest was history. They had this whirlwind romance. They were very full on very quickly. Before everybody even knew that they were dating, they were engaged. And Erin's parents reluctantly let Tori move in with them. They were kind of like, girls, this is really going very quickly. We just kind of need some time to get used to this all, but okay, you can move it. Then on the 25th of March, Erin's mum came home to an absolutely horrific scene. At the bottom of the stairs, lying by the back door, was Tori's bloodied body. Erin was frantic, yelling that a masked intruder had broke in, assaulted them both, killed Tori, and then fled. And Erin was like, I'm pretty sure I saw this person who was dressed all in black. I have no idea what they look like, but it looked like they'd left in a green car. The killer had not driven away. They were still in the house. So panicked, Erin and her mum got the police over there immediately, but tragically there was nothing that they could do to save Tori. And immediately police needed any information that Erin could give them at all to try and help track this masked intruder down. You know, potentially this person could be going on a killing spree. We don't know the motive yet, so this is an extremely dangerous situation. All kinds of theories were running wild. The police were wondering, you know, was this a jealous ex? Was this potentially Tori's ex-fiance? Could this have been a hate crime? Erin described seeing a terrifying man. She was pretty sure it was a man because of the build, wearing a black ski mask, black gloves, and black clothing. She was like, he broke in and pulled out a gun. She said, out of gut instinct, I tried to grab it. I tried to struggle with this guy, but he overpowered me. He was far too strong, so I ran upstairs. They were like, right, let's get you out of this house and to the station for questioning. We need to put this in writing. And weirdly, once they did that, she almost lost confidence in her story. Suddenly, she started reeling off all of the ways that Tori had abused her. She said they would get into arguments that turned into physical fights. She claimed the abuse was mental, physical, and sexual. On the surface, she said she tried to be portraying this perfect relationship to everyone. She really wanted to make this work. But things came to a head when she found out some devastating news. Erin was like, Tori told me that she was back in contact with her ex and had been seeing him behind my back. And Erin said she saw red. She admitted to watching her sleep that night and deciding to kill her. She pulled out a weapon and after pulling the trigger twice, horrifically realized she wasn't dead yet. She was still moving. So Erin grabbed a hammer. She started striking her in the face. She was like, then I panicked and I concocted a story. I hid the G in a cabinet and hid the hammer in a bucket in the garage. She'd then tried to make it look like an intruder had broken in by breaking one of the windows at the front of the house. I don't know if you guys are thinking the same as me, but I feel like she had tried to make it look like it was the ex-fiancé. Despite her confession, she pleaded not guilty because she was like, well, I was being abused. The jury didn't buy it though. They were like, no, this was an attack out of jealousy. This was rage. It was not self-defense, and she was given life without parole.
He was an entitled incel who hated women but still thought that all women should sleep with him. His heroes were Ted Bundy and Elliot Rodger, and he killed as a form of revenge because no women wanted him. Scott Burrell was born in New York. By all accounts, he had a pretty happy, normal childhood. His family went to church. Scott was a Boy Scout. Scott was a very shy child. He didn't have a lot of friends. He was constantly bullied in school, which got worse as he got older. He would later say that 8th grade was the worst year of his life. 8th grade was like his villain origin story, and it was the girls in his 8th grade class that Scott said teased him the most, and they would reject him, so he hated them. He hated the girls in his class, but he still wanted to sleep with them, and he thought that he was entitled to sleep with them. Scott was definitely bullied in school, but to be honest, he was kind of just a major a-hole in school. Like, he very openly hated anyone that wasn't a cishet white male. And because of all the pain that Scott felt by being rejected by all of these women, Scott's entire life, he turned to writing as an outlet. He wrote short stories, he wrote novels, he also wrote music. Scott saw himself as a very talented, genius songwriter. Let me know what you think.
I like to walk around lit, hanging out. I like to serve endless sauerkraut. The struggle's broken out. To hell with the boss, I won't get off my back. To hell with the girl, I can't get in the sack.
Scott lived with his parents a majority of his adult life. During college and every single job that Scott ever had, he would harass, stalk, grope, and essay his female classmates and coworkers. Scott wrote short stories about becoming a serial killer and killing women. Scott wrote songs about being fired for being a creep. He also wrote a song about kidnapping a woman and locking her in his basement that he called Locked in My Basement. And it honestly might be one of the most terrifying things I've ever heard.
So I slipped Euro-hypno when the opportunity shone. Now she's locked in my basement. She'll never say a word. When she screams out in terror, she cannot be heard. Oh, one day I know that she will learn to love me, but even when she does, I cannot set her free.
Like I said, Scott is living with his parents, and they find his disturbing writings, and they're so scared of their own son that his parents would lock their bedroom door at night. Scott wasn't just a danger to women, he was a danger to children as well. He was actually banned from attending any family parties after he was caught doing things to some of the children at a family pool party. But none of this stopped him at 26 years old getting a job as a teacher. And as you can imagine, he was extremely inappropriate to the very young, underage female students. One day, he ended up cornering one of his students in an empty classroom. He began touching her, and then he said that she could make it in Playboy and she should start wearing more revealing clothing to school. The student reported what her teacher did to her parents and the police, but absolutely nothing was done, and Scott would teach at that school for another year. It was always the same story at every single job that Scott ever had. He would be accused of being inappropriate with his female coworkers, making inappropriate comments, and touching his female coworkers. At one point, he joined the U.S. Army, and he was kicked out after being accused of essaying 4 of the female officers. At 33 years old, while Scott is still living with his parents, he decides to go back to college because he wants more access to young girls. And he attends Florida State University because it was the same university that infamous serial killer Ted Bundy attacked and murdered female college students. Ted Bundy was his hero, so this was no accident. He chose Florida State University on purpose. He would even drive by the same sorority house where Ted Bundy murdered 2 girls. And at Florida State University, Scott was arrested multiple times for touching young female students without their consent. He would go up behind them while they're walking around campus and touch them from behind. And even after he graduated at 35 years old, Scott would still go back to Florida State so he could go up and SA young female students. The police showed up multiple times. He was even banned from campus, but he kept going back. Scott hated women. He did not respect them, but he still hated that he was always being rejected by them. Scott truly believed that he was like God's gift to women, and he was entitled to date and sleep with whoever he wanted. And then in 2014, at 36 years old, Scott discovers the online incel community. If you don't know what an incel is, the term is short for involuntarily celibate. The men in this community feel like they are unable to find a romantic partner or find a woman that is willing to sleep with them, even though they really want those things. These men often have a deep resentment against women. They're very misogynistic. They blame women, society, and feminism for their situation, and they sometimes even endorse violence against women to get what they want and get revenge. When Scott found this community, it was like a whole new world for him. He would share all of his genius music with the incel community online. I'm gonna put some of the titles of some of Scott's songs on the screen right now, just so you can see how deeply offensive the music that he was creating was, and how deeply offensive he truly was. Obviously, I'm gonna have to blur out a lot of the words in the song titles, but if you're interested, a lot of his music is unfortunately still available online. Also in 2014, something else very significant happened to Scott and the incel community. 22-year-old incel Elliot Rodger committed a mass murder when he killed 6 people and injured another 14 before bringing an end to his own life, all in the name of the incel community. If that case sounds familiar to you, it's because I have already covered Elliot Rodger's case before. And before committing his horrific crimes, Elliot Rodger also posted a bunch of videos on YouTube where he discussed his frustrations with women.
I'm 22 years old and I'm still and it's been very torturous. It's not fair. You denied me a happy life. And in turn, I will deny all of you life. It's only fair. I hate all of you. I'm such a magnificent guy. I'm beautiful. You can't deny that. I've traveled all over the world. I have so much to talk about. I don't know why you girls are so repulsed by me. It doesn't make sense. I do everything I can to appear attractive to you. I dress nice. I'm sophisticated and magnificent. I have a nice car, a BMW. The girls are not such attracted to me. There's a major problem with that. A major problem. That's a problem that I intend to rectify. I, in all my magnificence and power, I will not let this fly. It's an injustice that needs to be dealt with.
And unfortunately, after committing mass murder, Elliot Rodger is idolized by a lot of men online, like the incel community, and I even saw that in my own comment section when I made a video on him. Elliot Rodger is like a hero to the incel community. He's even called the king of the incels. And Elliot was also Scott's hero. He idolized him. And he was inspired to start posting videos online because of Elliot, where he would rant about all of the people that he did not like.
Address the origins of my misogynism and the rebirth When I see an interracial couple, I think one of two things.
And obviously, he would talk a lot about his hatred towards women. He wanted to sleep with women. He wanted to date women. He wanted a girlfriend, but it kept being rejected. He even said that he went on 14 first dates and 0 second dates, and not once did he ever consider that maybe he was the problem. He even posts a really long video where he says the first and last names of all the girls that were mean to him in 8th grade. He's still stuck in 8th grade, and he's nearly 40 years old.
I would say the origins really derive in 8th grade. 8th grade home ec class. And I know there's a movie called Mean Girls, but that's girls being, I think, mean to other females. You've never, if you haven't seen the will that a group of females can generate when they target anyone, be it an adult male or a classmate or anyone. It's not just fellow classmates. It can be a grown man. Andrea Spizak, Melissa Harpst, Kelly Weeks, I think one other, and one particular, they're the central antagonist, Jessica Truesdale. How do you respond? 9th grade, Jamie Farrell pulled a Chernobyl, if you're watching. Lindsay Bly, Jennifer Abendroth, Heather King, and Leisha Gann. 4 I hope you're watching.
He even says in a video, unless he sleeps with a woman soon, he will commit a crime just like Elliot Rodger. A little while after this, Scott is arrested on SA charges, which were later dropped. He also gets another job teaching. At 38 years old, he's teaching middle school, and again, he's a total creep to the young underage female students. Scott becomes obsessed with underage cheerleaders and watching women do yoga, and he was fired from that teaching job after being caught watching adult content at school on the school computer. In 2018, Scott was 40 years old. He was unemployed. He was living with his parents, and he had less than $30 in his bank account. He felt that he was at an all-time low. He wanted revenge against society. He wanted revenge against women for how they treated him, how he was always rejected, and he started planning his horrific attack. Right before committing his brutal attack, old childhood friends of Scott actually reached out to the FBI because he was terrified that Scott was going to kill people after seeing all the songs and videos that Scott was posting online. But the FBI said that they couldn't do anything unless Scott made real threats because what he was posting was protected under free speech. Which brings us to November 2nd of 2018. Scott posted his final song, which was called F Them All. He then left behind a note that read, quote, "If I can't find one decent female to live with, I will find many decent females to die with. If they are intent on denying me life, I will have no choice but to deny them life. Their arrogance, indifference, and treachery will finally be exposed and punished. If I can't make a living, I will make a killing. I have no choice at this point," end quote. And then the 40-year-old Scott left his hotel room and walked over to the yoga studio called Hot Yoga Tallahassee with his yoga mat and a weapon. Class began at 5:30. The class began filling up of mostly women. And then 5 minutes into the class, Scott took out his weapon and opened fire. He shot 6 people before his weapon jammed. A male employee of the yoga studio took that opportunity to attack Scott with a vacuum cleaner before tackling him to the ground. And when Scott was apprehended, he was on the ground. He found a way to unjam his weapon. He brought it up to his head and brought an end to himself. Most of his victims were able to be brought to the hospital, treated, and survived his vicious attack. But sadly, 2 of the women that Scott shot did not survive. 21-year-old Mara Bankley and 61-year-old Nancy Van Vessem. Both tragically died at the scene 5 minutes into their yoga class. Nancy was a doctor, a chief medical officer, and the mother to 3 beautiful daughters. Mara was a very loved daughter. She was a college student at Florida State University, and she was about to graduate. And this case absolutely breaks my heart. These 2 beautiful women that just wanted to go to a yoga class. They didn't know Scott. And then their lives were stolen from them, and they were stolen from their families. And for what? Because Scott is a pathetic loser who is also a coward. Because of his actions, he will never be able to be held responsible for all of the pain that he caused. I know that this was an extremely long video, so if you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for listening to the entirety of Mara and Nancy's story. Give me like pink or red emojis in the comments so I know you made it to the end. And while you're in the comments, let me know all your thoughts on this case. I have a pretty good feeling that I know how it's gonna go, but while you're in the comments, please remember to be respectful, because people that actually knew Maura and Nancy in real life could be in the comments. You have no idea who could be reading your comments, so just please always be respectful. And my heart truly, truly, truly goes out to every single person that knew and loved Maura and Nancy. While you're in the comments, let me know what case you want to see me cover next. Thank you to every single person that suggested that we covered this case today, and I will see you guys all next time in my next video. Please be a good person to your fellow person.